A. Gabriel García Márquez's 100 Years of Solitude was initially published in Spanish in 1967, with the English translation following 3 years later. The novel presents the story of a family and the village it helped found, and is multi-generational and epic in its scope. This book contains many whole lives. Characters are born, characters die, and everything happens to them in between. It feels impossible to summarize the vast number of events and ideas that are contained here. Similarly, there aren't enough words to capture the praise and reverence this iconic novel has earned over the years. It's beloved by casual readers and literary scholars. It's apparently sold a staggering 50 million copies worldwide, and Márquez himself won the Nobel Prize in Literature for his achievements. Plus, it inspired Disney's Encanto, so there's that. The story of the Buendia family and the village of Macondo is highly imaginative, and the plot takes nothing but unexpected and often thrilling turns. The character names repeat through the generations, which can be confusing at first, but it turns out that there's both humor and meaning in this feature, and eventually you overcome the need to flip back to the family tree to help make sense of the Buendia lineage. You just go with it. You grow to love the characters, you grow to hate some of them. And while the solitude of the title is certainly prevalent, and there's plenty of violence and misery, there's also a lot of joy in this book. There are casual miracles and moments of pure human wonder around almost every page. 100 Years of Solitude shares characteristics with some of my favorite novels. It has the multi-generational depiction of family and the commitment of place from East of Eden, and it has the thoughtful sociological complexity found in Anna Karenina. But it has a degree of playfulness well beyond either one of those masterpieces. It's far less naturalistic and far more creative and fantastical. It isn't similar in tone or style, but to me it fits in with them because of its profound and important truths. It deals with language, invention, infection, war, politics, love, so much love, and progress. It's life in a book. It's tragic and magic and magnificent. I read this novel for the first time from this Harper Perennial Modern Classics edition. It's a trade paperback version from 2006 and features a great illustration on the cover that wraps around the book. It contains Gregory Rabas's translation from Spanish to English and opens with the Buendia family tree, then jumps into the text itself. Each unnumbered chapter is adorned with this decorative leaf flourish, and it has 15 pages of light back matter in the PS section. When I had the chance to upgrade from the trade paperback to a more deluxe illustrated hardback copy, I couldn't resist. So let's do this. Here we have 100 Years of Solitude from the Folio Society. This edition was originally released in 2006 and is presented in a dark green slipcase. You know you're dealing with a fancy folio when the slipcase has these shaped edges that accommodate the curve of the spine. The slipcase is illustrated on one side by the great Neil Packer. The image features two figures at the center, surrounded by simple buildings, birds, insects, and vegetation, all against a gold background. There is some wonderfully fine detail in the small images like the gold veins in these tiny leaves. The book itself is wrapped in green buckram cloth with a gold design printed on one side. This echoes the placement of the figures on the slipcase, but may be a different couple. On the spine we have the title in white, while the author and publisher name are in gold. The binding is appropriately finished with a green and white headband. When we crack the book open, we see amazing illustrated heavy end papers on a heavy gold stock. 11 different figures are depicted here, and they're lifted from elsewhere in this edition. And the book is printed on Caxton wove paper, which is smooth due to the wire mesh used in its production, and which comes in at a slightly off-white color, according to swatches. If we bring back the old Harper Perennial paperback edition for a brief side-by-side, we can see that the Folio Society version is bigger, with an extra 5 centimeters in height and 2 centimeters more in width. Inside, the Folio version has whiter paper, larger and crisper text, and more generous side margins, making it far more inviting to read. Like the paperback, this edition contains Rabas's excellent translation into English. The folio version also opens with the family tree and jumps right into the narrative without an introduction, which is unfortunate. I always look forward to their unique and exclusive intros. One of my favorite folio artists, Neil Packer, provides the interior art here. He is so versatile. He incorporated Roman and Surrealist elements into his work on the Claudius novels, and World War II era advertising and propaganda into his work for Catch-22. Here, he cleverly brings a Latin American aesthetic to his own style. He still employs pattern and texture along with high-detailed, beautifully rendered forms, but has flattened out his pale human figures and emphasizes their colorful outfits. He has provided 9 color illustrations beyond the image for the slipcase. These color illustrations are usually right next to the text they coincide with, though in a few instances they're a little further away and are up to 20 pages apart. They're presented on thick glossy paper that highlights the exquisite artwork. Now let's take a detailed look at these illustrations. For the frontispiece, we see a map of Macondo, with the sea, the swamp, and the mountains all visible at the top. This image is inspired by the days when a plague of insomnia strikes the village, and they begin to lose track of the names of things. Patriarch Jose Arcadio Buendia proceeds to label everything with its name so they won't forget, including common household objects and even the livestock. This cow hilariously gets specific instructions for milking, while a sign that says "God exists" is placed on Main Street to remind the people of that truth. In the second illustration, we see a depiction of Father Nicanor Reyna, who wants to build a church in Macondo. He makes his rounds among the townspeople collecting funds. When he doesn't get the support he wants, he performs an act meant to prove the infinite power of God. He drinks a cup of steaming chocolate and levitates 6 inches from the ground. This impresses many, but not Jose Arcadio Buendia, who shrugs with indifference and speaks a few phrases of Latin. He suggests that it's a simple trick and the father has plainly just discovered a 4th state of matter, no big deal. This illustration uses text to great effect. At the top, we have the Aztec word for chocolate, while the passage from the novel wraps around the image of the levitating father and his planned church. Below that, we have a cocoa bean shaped like an eye, with the Latin dialogue exchange around it. That's followed by artist Neil Packer's take on the Buendia family tree. The family is known for reoccurring names and specific patterns of behavior that seem to come with those names. This is thrown for a slight twist in the 4th generation, when twin brothers, who are all but impossible to tell apart, begin growing up opposite to their namesake. Young Jose Arcadio Segunda takes on characteristics similar to his granduncle Aureliano Buendia, while young Aureliano Segunda comes to resemble his great-grandfather Jose Arcadio Buendia. This makes the family matriarch Ursula wonder if the twins accidentally lost track of who was who when they used to switch identities as young boys. This image helps illustrate the confusion of the family tree, which isn't just a problem for the reader, but for the characters themselves too. The 4th illustration is a great symbolic piece inspired by the scene where the train first arrives in Macondo. It's described as it approaches as something frightful, like a kitchen dragging a whole village behind it. That wide-eyed description comes to life here as a stovetop takes the form of a locomotive and drags 2-dimensional buildings like houses, hotels, and businesses through the countryside and over trellis bridges. The 5th illustration depicts the ascension of Remedios the Beauty. One afternoon, the women of the Buendia household go out to fold Fernanda's finest bed sheets. Suddenly, the sheets open wide and lift up in the wind. Amaranta tries to hang on, but the sheets and Remedios herself rise past the reach of the birds, beyond the upper atmosphere as she's lifted up to heaven. Mr. Packer's inclusion of the beetles and dahlias are a great little nod to the specific passage from the novel, and we can even see the new fenced-off section of town that the banana company builds. Next up is an illustration of Aureliano Segunda, who possesses an incredible appetite. He hosts irrational tournaments of capacity and resistance, eating contests that draw crowds, and for a long while, he is the champion, until the day that Camillo Sagustum comes to Macondo. As they eat veal and roast turkey and so many fried bananas, their different eating styles become clear, because Camilla eats with pleasure, while Aurelio Segunda is an unprincipled eater. Their contest lasts well over 24 hours, and Camilla defeats him. The 7th image depicts the civil disobedience around the treatment of workers at the banana plantation. A great strike breaks out and the army is sent in to re-establish public order under martial law. The workers gather at a station as an army lieutenant addresses the crowd. Jose Arcadio Segunda lifts a young boy in the crowd up on his shoulders to better hear, before a scene of horrific violence breaks out. To me, the most impressive aspect of this illustration is the variety of design, color, and pattern used for the clothing in the crowd. The 8th illustration is a depiction of Macondo as the town and the Buendia lineage begin to diminish. There are a lot of elements in this piece. At the top, we have the famous quote from Aureliano Segunda, who's asked his cows to stop proliferating, and which is eventually placed on his casket via a purple wreath. Below that, we see the buildings of Macondo cracked and with vegetation overtaking them, and the broken down yellow train. We see the barren banana plantation, and the figures are posed before the cemetery, with members of the Buendia family and the gypsies. The gypsies return to Macondo after years away and start showing the same wonders they did at the beginning of the story, the magnet and the magnifying glass. At the bottom of the image is another familiar refrain from the novel, repeated when someone is surprised by the changes with the passage of time. Again, the details of the clothing and the unique character given to each figure in this group shot is impressive. This piece also calls back to the style of the second image, which just reinforces that cyclical aspect of life, which the novel and this image are all about. The final illustration is a depiction of the Buendia family home near the end of the book. Despite numerous attempts to update and repair it, eventually the house succumbs to a crisis of senility. The front facade is cracked, and the vegetation at the center seems to force it open from the inside. Each room has a white tree growing in it. Below the house, we see the ants who've been weakening the foundation since the ascension of Remedios the Beauty, and here they've pulled down a baby's corpse. This signifies the end of the Buendia bloodline. Neil Packer has even included a precise element in the corpse's anatomy here. If you know, you know. I am very pleased to add this edition of 100 Years of Solitude to my bookshelf. I happen to have the first printing here, and I don't know if they've released subsequent printings. It is rather pricey on the secondary market, and I honestly spent a little more than I'm comfortable with for a used copy, but when I get a shot at adding a literary masterpiece to my folio collection, it's hard to say no. As for my paperback edition, I'm ready to move on from it, so it's the box of doom for you. Because now I have my forever copy of this wonderful novel, and I need more room on the shelf so I can fill it with more books in the future. As always, thanks for watching, and if you'd like similar content, feel free to circle back to previous videos, or keep an eye on this channel for future upgrades.